One of the points that's constantly made these days by the new atheists is the idea that God is some kind of heavenly dictator, a big brother who's constantly spying on you and watching you and is out to spoil your enjoyment. And as human beings, we want to be free, and we need to get rid of the shackles of such an obsolete view of things. Well, it seems to me that at a number of levels, this is a very distorted view and an extremely simplistic view. Of course, none of us like dictatorships. We've had enough of them. And a heavenly dictator would presumably be much worse than an earthly dictator. But the first thing I would want to say, that when it comes to the God who's revealed in the Bible, we get two complementary sides to his character. Now, the new atheists clearly don't like the idea of a God who is judge. Christopher Hitchens talks about God pursuing you after you're dead and all this kind of thing. And by emphasizing that side, which we'll come to in a moment, they fail to see that there's another side, and that is the revelation of God who loves us and cares for us. To take simpler things first, one could, I suppose, say that the institution of marriage is a terrible thing, because who would want to have a woman watching them all the time in the house, or a man, and so on. And that kind of a description, though factually it could be taken as true, one person is watching the other, would leave out all that is wonderful about the relationship of care and affection, of love and trust, and so on. So it is a distorted view. And many people, for example, especially if they're undergoing hardship and difficulty, have been comforted in their hearts by knowing that there is a God who cares for them. But to take this a little bit further, it's the idea of judgment and accountability that lies behind this. Human beings claim they want to be free, and they see God as a threat to their freedom. Well, the first thing to notice is this, that if there is no God, then this life is restricted to 70 years, more or less. And the blind forces that created us are going to get us in the end. They're going to crush the very life out of us. And we end up in a kind of silence of an eternal tomb. It's some freedom that, when we're ultimately at the mercy of mindless forces. On the other hand, if you believe, as I do, that there is a God, then certain things follow from that. And one of them, in Christian belief at any rate, is that death is not the end, and there is accountability and judgment. And the interesting thing is that when we read some of the biblical descriptions of that judgment, they are highly poetic, and they go like this: let the trees clap their hands and let the mountains sing, because God is going to come and judge. Far from seeing the judgment of God as something grim and awful to be feared and run away from, they were delighted that God was going to come and judge. Why was that? Because it meant that justice was going to be done. Now let's look at the atheist position. It claims to be interested in justice. But the fact is that millions, if not billions of people will never get justice. If people don't get justice in this life, and very few do, there is no next life for them to get justice in. So in the end, they get no justice whatsoever. Whereas the Bible clearly tells us that God is a just and fair and loving judge. And so, if people do not get justice in this life, there will be a judgment at which they do get justice. And that therefore backs up the fact that the new atheists are wrong when they claim that our conscience is essentially an illusion. The new atheists are wrong when they claim that conscience is an illusion. It isn't an illusion. This is a moral universe. So, by removing the judge, they've actually removed all hope of justice, and they end up in a universe which, to my mind, is not free at all. It is an absolute prison. So, summing that up, I would say that there are a couple of points to be made. The first is, it is a distorted view. The second is, the notion of there being no God means you remove justice. And let me put, finally, the two notions together. David Berlinski recalls that during the Second World War, a Gestapo officer was executing a Jewish person, and the Jewish person said just before he was shot, "God is watching you." And of course the Gestapo officer just laughed. Hitchens may object to the notion of a God watching him, but whatever you think of Stalin or Hitler or Mao or Pol Pot, the fact is that they did not believe there was a God who was watching them, and millions would wish that they had.